So did you ever wonder how a species got named and how it gets categorized? Because if so, welcome to this chapter. So this chapter is going to go over how we organize living things, how we name them, how we classify them, how we figure out their evolutionary relationships, and how we can draw that out. So phylogeny is going to be studying the pattern of events that led to the diversity of life. And phylogeny is drawing this kind of stuff out. So I have a phylogenetic tree that I can show you right here to kind of show you what we're looking at. So this is showing foxes, jackals, wolves, even bears, and showing the relationships between each other. So don't worry about the numbers, just worry about like this branching diagram. That's a phylogenetic tree. I think I have another one that's way more simple, but this is showing like different types of bacteria and then, eukaryotes and kind of how that works. So if you're going to give something a name, a phylum, a species, whatever, that's called taxonomy. So Carolus Linnaeus is going to be the father of taxonomy, and he based most of those taxonomic names on Latin or Greek roots of words, as you'll see as we go throughout the semester. So if we were to combine the naming, which is taxonomy, with the phylogeny, which is actually drawing those trees, we call that systematics. So it's the combination of taxonomy and phylogeny together. Okay, so species names. Species names are going to be a binomial naming system. What I mean by that is bi means two, right? So you have two names when you name something. It's the genus and the species name. So they're pretty much going to be in Latin, and the reason for that is because that's the universal language of science, and so that's how that's going to work. So if we look at my PowerPoint, at our next slide, here is our species names for a human. So a couple of things I want you to notice. One is that it's in italics, so that's important. The other way that you can write it is normally and then underline it. The other thing I want you to notice, this first part is called the genus, and then this is called the species name. So the genus is always going to be capitalized and the species is not. So that's how you properly write a genus and species names. So here I've got it, genus is capitalized, species is not, always written in italics, or you can write it regularly and underline it. Now, as far as taxonomic hierarchy goes, so how do we actually know the order of things, right? The most broad group that we've got is a domain, and there's 3 of them. And then the domain can be broken into 6 separate kingdoms. And then the kingdoms have phyla within them, and then the phyla have classes within them, and so on and so on. So it's domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So that's kind of hard to remember, I'm sure, for a lot of you, and for me it was too. And so when I was in college, my hilarious professor kind of gave us a way to remember this. So you've got domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, right? And so what he did is he said, let's come up with a little sentence to help you remember the order, right? So he said, did King Philip come over for good? I bet you can guess what he said for the S word. We'll say spaghetti. But I bet you know what college students probably said, right? So did King Philip come over for good spaghetti? Now you can remember the order of domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, right? So that's how you can kind of remember that. You'll see that in science a lot. There's like these weird mnemonic devices to remember stuff. Okay, so when we talk about cladistics is very similar to drawing phylogenetic trees. Basically, it's the same thing. It's definitely a process, and it's very interesting if you look at phylogenetic trees that were drawn from like hundreds of years ago versus now. Hundreds of years ago, they had to go with, characteristics. Now we have DNA to help us do that. But don't forget, with fossils and stuff, we don't have DNA, and so we do have to use those types of things. So one thing that's really important when you start to do phylogenetics is determining whether a characteristic is homologous or analogous. Homologous means those homologous structures that we talked about a couple chapters ago where they have the same basic structure, they just might be used differently. versus analogous structures, which is where, yeah, they both have wings, but there is nothing in common with those wings because one doesn't even have bones in it, right? So that's going to help you, because if you were like, oh, everything that has wings is going to be grouped over here, you might be wrong, right? So you want to look at the actual structures and make sure that you're looking at things correctly. Okay, so in the next video, we'll talk about some of the major groupings and how we kind of do that.